Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Friday, everybody. Today we're going to take a look at Venus and the Sun in Gemini, moving through a square to Saturn in Pisces. That is coming through this weekend. Want to make sure that you're ready for it. We've talked about it in some of the other videos this week, but we're going to look at 5 different things to watch for today, given these archetypes and the combination in the sky. So that's our goal for today. Before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your comments and reflections if you have them. We love hearing from you guys. As always, it's really nice to see your stories. If you've got a really unique story to share, use the hashtag grab, tell us the transit, tell us your story, or email the story to us, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. When you go over there, 2 things I'm promoting today. 1, under the events page, go to live talks, and you can see that my June talk on the 13th is coming up. It is called The 12th House, The World We Struggle to See. And in this talk, I will be breaking down the whole sign house combinations of house 1 and 12, the rising sign and every accompanying 12th house sign, as a way of trying to unpack those archetypal juxtapositions for the sake of personal growth and healing. There's so much to be learned by looking at the juxtaposition between your rising sign and your 12th house sign. So that's what we will be looking at in this class. A great one to get to know the 12th house, erase some misconceptions, and gain some healing insight. Uranus and Gemini will be in July. If you missed any of the previous talks since I started this monthly webinar series, you can see those are also for sale there or on the shop page, in addition to lots of other cool stuff you can pick up on the shop page, different master classes we offer and stuff like that. If you go to courses page, first year course is coming up. It starts on June 16th. Our first year class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, begins June 16th. On the bottom, you'll find registration options. You can learn more about everything the program includes on that page. We do have need-based tuition assistance for all of our programs. If it helps you to make the program more accessible, we try to make sure nobody's priced out. So if you have financial constraints or concerns that you're experiencing right now, please do check that out. The other course that I want you to look at is the Horary Astrology class, which begins on June 22nd. This is great for people who have a background in traditional astrology already. If you have a little bit of training under your belt, you can start the Horary program. If you don't know what Horary is, if you're like, what the heck is that? Stick around after I'm done with today's content. There is an informational video that I have edited onto the end of this video so you can learn more about it. You can see me do a horary reading, and it's a really cool form of astrology. Even if you don't take the class, stick around to see what horary is. It's a cool thing to learn about. All right, on that note, what we are doing today, let's move into our exploration of the Venus-Sun square to Saturn. I'm going to put the real-time clock up on the page, and here is what I want to draw your attention to. Oops, here we go. And you can see right here, Venus and the Sun moving through squares to Saturn. So Venus will come through that square first. It moves through the square between today, Friday, June 7th, and Saturday, June 8th. And then the Sun will also move through the square. Excuse me. And you can see the square coming through by Sunday, June 9th, it will have perfected. So Venus and the Sun moving through squares to Saturn over the weekend, June 7th, 8th, and 9th. That's the range. You could stretch this out a little bit, and you'll notice that if you give these planets 3 degrees of separation, then you're fully separated by about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. And so if you notice the lingering effects, the little bit of the heaviness in the air around this in the early part of next week, that would not be a surprise. So I want to talk today about 5 things that you can watch for given this square. And there are so many different ways of turning the archetypal jewel, but it's really good when you have an archetypal combination, Venus, Saturn, Sun, Saturn, or in this case, all 3, to try to get at the archetypal experience from a number of different levels or looking at it from different angles. Archetypes are multivalent, which means the themes that they express are consistent, while the expressions of those themes can be relatively different from person to person and situation to situation. So any and all of the things we're going to talk about today fall under the banner of the Venus-Sun square to Saturn, and yet you may experience one of these far louder or, more importantly, with more emphasis than another one on the list. And that's totally how astrology works. And frankly, it's one of the main reasons that people don't understand astrology. They'll say, well, the 2 things that people will say, one is that it doesn't seem accurate to what I experienced. And in that case, in many cases, people are not understanding that the same archetype is present, although the theme is expressing itself differently. So they hear an astrologer mention one theme and they mistakenly think that, well, that didn't show up for me, so astrology doesn't work. Really, what they need is to hear an approach to astrology that's archetypally multivalent, which means that we look at themes and we look at variations of themes like a mandala. And once you understand astrology from that point, it's easy to then see the expression of the archetype at work in your life. The other thing that people say is that, well, you can say astrology can make anything. You can sort of retroactively fit astrology to make anything true, or that you can make the symbols fit to anything. Yes, and we don't deny that. In fact, we're proud of it. Yes, astrology is a language of symbols and patterns, but the difference is that we believe that reality itself is fundamentally a pattern-making and pattern-expressing experience. That life itself is pattern. And so we don't think that it's a problem that you can find patterns anywhere you look. We're in the business of doing that, and we're not ashamed of it. We're trying to give you languages to help you understand and recognize the different kinds of patterns that are always present. And astrology is just one of many, many, many different kinds of languages that exist, that are just inherent in reality, that allow us to see, experience, and appreciate. Symbolic languages and patterns are really just they're modes or mediums of communication that reality has with itself. And when we see and understand those languages, we get to participate in the expression and the relational dynamics of reality itself. It's like you understand music. Well, now you understand that life in part expresses itself musically. So you get to participate in the musical expression of life. There's also an astrological expression. And if you learn it, yes, everything falls and fits into the astrological language. We don't consider that a problem. We're actually quite proud of it. So anyway, 5 things to watch for. Number 1, when you get the Sun and Venus together, there is a way in which, remember that Venus, one of the primary meanings of Venus is the word harmony. And when the Venus comes at the heart of the Sun and now is emerging and recovering from the reset of her synodic cycle with the Sun, she's being reborn. And there's a way in which she will carry with her right now a sense of reinvigorated harmony. It's like there's flow, there's a sense of beauty and grace, and maybe a very attractive sense of what's possible right now. Or there's a feeling of, reset, rebirth in relationships or in any Venusian dimension of life. Saturn in Pisces, along with Neptune in Pisces, who's there by whole sign square, in the superior square, will provide a reality check. Is this all that you think it is? Or are you deluding yourself? Is this as good as you think it is? Or is there some immaturity or recklessness? Or is there something you're missing or something you're taking for granted? So Saturn can just provide this, like, is this real? Are you being, at its worst, it's sort of like the wing clipping presence of some kind of Eeyore, just like, but are you sure, are you sure you ought to be having this much fun? Or are you sure that this thing that you desire or you find attractive, or the progress or harmony that you're feeling as an emergent phenomenon right now, are you sure that it's appropriate? Are you sure you deserve it? Or isn't it too good to be true? So it can be like that. Now, that might be something that we have to overcome, a voice of doubt, a voice of apprehension, a killjoy, and we just have to transcend it. On the other hand, it could be pointing us to some level of self-deception that we also have to overcome. And so Saturn can be the voice of something trying to keep us sort of real. It can also be the voice of some kind of doubt that we, or a limit or block to progress that we have to let go of. Number 2, the need for contemplative distance. Venus and the Sun in Gemini is very outgoing and expressive and youthful and playful and curious. To me, it even has a little bit of magical mischievous quality to it. Saturn in Pisces, on the other hand, is a bit like the Hermit card in the tarot, where there's some need to step back and contemplate. Now, that it sounds a little bit like the same thing as a reality check, but there may be a way in which, just as some kind of creative impetus is coming through, Venus and the Sun conjoining at the heart of this new moon recently, that just as this kind of creative, youthful, exploratory, enthused quality of Venus and the Sun is coming through, that there's just a little interlude that we need to just take a step back and take some time to really sink in. It's just so excitable, all of this Gemini energy. Have we sat and let it register in our bodies, in our feeling body, so to speak? Have we taken it in and sat with it and done some healthy, reflective distancing from the joy and enthusiasm and impulsiveness, even if it's just for like 2 days, to sit back and just really make sure that we've taken it in on an emotional, instinctual level? Have we taken it into our private temple? Meditation, prayer, journaling, a little bit of quiet time, a walk in the woods. Have we taken enough time to just sit with whatever emergent, bubbly, busy bee phenomenon is coming through? So the need for contemplative distance is sort of baked into this square as an opportunity, not something to avoid. On the other hand, if something is telling you step back, pull away, distance yourself, almost like you're starting to have fun at a party and some voice in you says, you're not supposed to have fun. You're always shy and introverted and anxious, and these situations usually overwhelm you. So run, well, in that case, you might want to lean into it rather than step away. But watch for the tension between these kinds of energies at any rate. Number 3, Venus and the Sun in Gemini, especially with Jupiter and Mercury co-present. One of the things that's actually interestingly associated with Gemini is games and gaming. Jupiter and Gemini coincided with the release of the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox, which were major revolutions in gaming. Gemini is frequently, especially Venus and Gemini, associated with the joy of the joy of fun and games and playfulness. So there's a lot of reason to think right now that so much of what's happening in Gemini is about this kind of open, fun, playful zone. Again, Saturn in Pisces says, are you leaving behind some kind of responsibility? For example, Venus combusts the Sun can be associated with the desire body being set on fire. It's just like, I'm horny. I want to spend too much. I want to eat too much. I want to, there's a kind of like when Venus is combust the Sun, there's a way in which the desire body can just be sort of lit on fire. The passions can be stirred up to maybe an extreme. So you think Saturn in Pisces, the place of Venus's exaltation, may just say, is this refined? Is it sophisticated? Is it spiritually centered? Is it taking into consideration larger emotional realities, larger, long-term, more, consequential dimensions of what you're doing? In other words, what will happen over a long period of time based on what I'm doing right now? So all of that kind of big picture concern or consideration of like the emotional consequences of actions and activities around fun, joy, playfulness, exploration could be a part of what we experience from Saturn and Pisces right now. Number 4, when you have so much in air and then a check from Saturn and Pisces in water, the general concern with mental and emotional health can be a big topic. Am I grounded? Am I safe? Am I stable? Am I sane? Do I have emotional boundaries in place? Consequences for lack of boundaries in relationships, mentally, verbally, emotionally, could be a big part of this. Like, there are consequences when we don't have those boundaries, when we don't have a certain kind of groundedness. On the other hand, the need to overcome fear, let go of inhibitions, play, flow, that could be part of this as well. But there's a delicate balance in air and water with mind and emotion. And so just remember that that's at work right now in a really big way. Number 5, sacrifice and greater responsibilities that test or challenge our desires or creative direction. Saturn in Pisces also just reminds us that there are things and people and places and energies bigger than ourselves that we are here to serve, that we are bound to with a kind of sacred duty. Now, okay, I use the example, I think in a previous video, of like, I want to go to the mall, very Venus and Gemini. Well, you can't because your sister's at home sick and we need you to stay here because we got to work. It's a simple example, but life right now, reality right now may have something like somebody or something that needs something from you. And there's sacrifice required, and it feels like it's raining on your parade. It's a little Saturn in water sign. And yet this emerges as a test. It's not, I think if you're tested right now, it can go in one of two directions. One, are any of us really deserving of the new, exciting, creative energy coming into our life? If we want to think about all the Gemini energy like that, the Venus Cazimi like that, if we cannot simultaneously be considerate and in service to things that require a bit of sacrifice on our part. It's like, how ready are we for some new, exciting, creative energy or direction if the only way we can do it is if we set aside any and all obligations to other people or any dimension of sacrifice, any sense of responsibility, right? I think that there's something that tests us that says, you know how we know our guides or whatever, you know how we know you're ready for the excitement and enthusiasm coming through right now is if you're able to say, it'll still be here. It'll still be here in 5 minutes, but I still have to serve this person, or I still have to, there's a dimension of service that requires something of me, and it's not going to take me away from this. I'm coming back to it. So we have to be like that. On the other hand, for some of us, it may be the opposite scenario where we have had a tendency of building our sense of self-worth or our ego through acts of sacrifice. People will love me if I set myself aside. I will not be discardable if I'm constantly someone sacrificing like this, you know. And when something new comes in that's really asking us to follow and pursue our joy, our enthusiasm, our excitement, there's new people and energies stimulating us, and then that temptation comes up. Why don't you just set it aside and step back into the martyr mode? You know, okay, so if, in that case, you might have to say, no, I'm sorry. I cannot serve you right now. I cannot make this sacrifice right now because something new has come up for me and I need to pursue it and let go of this old pattern of setting myself aside. Now, I'm suspicious naturally, so, I'm a little cynical. And so when I feel like what I see on social media in the confessional boxes of Instagram and Threads and whatever else, I feel like 90% of the time people are saying, enough, now it's got to be about me. And instantly that makes me feel like, well, there's probably 90% of people it needs to be about doing you while being in service or making some sacrifices, because I don't know, when everyone seems to be saying the same thing, that now it needs to be about me, I feel like there's some kind of new age narcissism at work. And so I would at least, and I look at myself too, like I would at least consider that the sacrifices or requirements of Saturn right now need something more than just a flippant brush off saying, no, now it's going to be about me, right? I would be careful of that, honestly, because I think we're all prone to egoism more than we think we are. But I am a little bit cynical. So to be fair, maybe it's more like 50-50, maybe about half of us out there really do need to set aside the people pleasing or the martyr act and stick with something right now and sidestep some kind of weighty feeling of obligation that tries to burden us or pull us away from a creative process. Okay. So maybe there's like 50% of us that need that message. Don't act like a martyr now. You got to do your thing. But there's probably at least 50% of us who need to recognize that we can do two things at once. We can embrace and be very excited about something new while also meeting some kind of karmic requirements represented by Saturn in Pisces. I don't know. For me personally, I feel like it's always more of a test to hold two things at the same time than to trip out into, getting polarized. So for me, I get more excited by the idea of holding some joy while meeting some kind of karmic Saturnian requirement and not letting it, not letting it take me away from the joyful thing, but feeling like I can do both at once. That makes me more excited. It's like, it feels like a challenge. Like, I'm mature enough to do that. I can figure that out. But I do recognize that there are some people in life where it's like, man, if you just have a pattern of constantly setting your own interests aside, and a lot of times we do that because we think that's how we get love or we get respect or whatever, then, it might be a time where you have to disappoint someone, or you have to feel like you're letting someone or something down. You're setting your cross down, so to speak, and experiencing the grace and forgiveness of pursuing something that's truly lighting you up inside without any sense of guilt or obligation. So I don't know. Anyway, I'm trying to hopefully talk through the archetype and the tensions inherent enough so that you can take this conversation and roll with it in the way that feels best for you. All right, that's it for today. I hope that you guys have a great weekend, and that Saturn's presence is a wise and an instructive presence and not a killjoy. But let me know. Tell me your stories. I'd love to hear from you. After I sign off, stick around to hear more about the horary program coming up. All of our programs in June, the 12th house talk coming up in June. We'd love to see you guys there. We will see you again next week. Bye. Hey, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. I'm going to tell you guys more about the upcoming horary astrology program, which begins later in June. And I hope that if you have never learned anything about horary, that you will, at least in listening to this, be exposed to horary astrology, have a little bit of an understanding of what it is. And if not now, then maybe sometime in the future, you can take time to study it. It is one of the forms of astrology that dates back to the earliest eras of astrology, the Hellenistic era, the medieval era, the early Indian period of astrology. And it is a branch of astrology that is concerned with specific predictive questions. So, for example, a horary question is usually formed in terms of a yes or no answer, and it is cast from the location of the astrologer at the time that the astrologer receives the question. So a typical horary question might be, will I get the job? Or will we get married? Or my cat went missing, will she come back? There are applications of horary astrology that involve the location of missing items, like where is my missing pen? Or where is, I actually helped a farmer one time locate a missing bull that had gotten out of the pasture. So it's a very, really fascinating form of astrology. It's very old, and it is like the birth chart of a question, a predictive question. So again, if I receive a question from someone and it's like, will I get the job? Then I cast that chart at the time I get the question. I usually use the receipt of the email time. And then I cast a chart for that question. And there are a series of traditional techniques that have been around for a very long time, thousands of years, that are used to determine the answer to that question. So with that in mind, let me show you a chart and you can learn, see what it's like in real time. So this chart is, the question that was asked is, will my spouse keep his job? This is a woman who had some very good reason to worry that her spouse might be getting laid off. And so she wanted to know so she could prepare herself, is he in fact going to be laid off from his job? And so when I receive that question, that's a horary question. When I receive it at 9:03 a.m. on April 10th of 2023, a little over a year ago here in Minnetonka, Minnesota, where I live, I cast a chart that becomes the birth chart of that question. I then use a series of techniques, and that's what you're going to learn in the horary program, are those techniques that go into answering all different kinds of questions. Questions about jobs, questions about money, questions about health, questions about marriage or relationships, questions about babies, questions about in pregnancy. I mean, you name it. And even missing pets and people and missing items. You see a lot of different approaches in horary. And so over the course of a year, we study those approaches to different kinds of questions, and we practice and practice with different charts of different questions, learning the techniques so that we can have this predictive tool in our kit as an astrologer. So anyway, here's a question: will spouse keep his job? In horary, what happens is you are always looking at the planets that represent the people and aspects of the question. The person asking the question is called the querent. The querent is always given the ruler of the ascendant and usually the moon as a co-signifier of the querent. So in this case, Gemini is rising. So we're going to give the we're going to give Mercury to the querent and the moon. Well, we can see the moon is sitting right on the cusp of the 7th house of marriage, which shows us that the querent, the person asking the question, is indeed really concerned about their spouse. The placement of the moon gives that away because it's sitting on the cusp of the 7th, which is going to be the house of the partner. So you see little things like that. They're a little wink that you have you have a radical chart, so to speak. Now, the 7th house ruler is going to be the spouse. That's Jupiter, since Sagittarius sits on the 7th house cusp. In horary, we use quadrant-based houses because the theory was all developed through quadrant-based house systems, which is interesting. So this is the only place in my practice that I teach from and use a quadrant-based house system, not whole sign. Anyway, it's really fascinating to look at this chart because Jupiter is going to represent the spouse. So we can see Jupiter over here, about to be conjoined by the sun. Then we look at the spouse's job. And the spouse's job is going to be the 10th house from the spouse. The 10th house from the 7th is going to be the ruler of the 4th. That's called derived houses. This is something that appears in horary quite a bit. So if we take the spouse as house 1 and we count 1 through 10 from house 7, we get to the cusp of house 4 for the 10th from the 7th, or the spouse's job. That is the sun. So here we see that the sun, exalted sun in Aries, is about to conjoin Jupiter. This means that Jupiter is combust. And when Jupiter is combust like that so badly and the sun is about to conjoin it, that is a moment of death for Jupiter. So the job, we know that combustion from a planet like that is often implied in the charts of death, or that's a condition of debility for Jupiter at the hands of the exalted sun. And Jupiter is, of course, sitting on the 12th house cusp, which is the derived 6th from the 7th house of the spouse, a place that was associated with misfortune. So we can see that this is a very clear indication that that Jupiter is being debilitated by, burnt up by the job. And that moment that's coming of the conjunction could be positively looked at as maybe a death and rebirth of your career. But the first thing that's happening is the death. When it is a possibility built into the question that he could be one of the people that's about to be laid off at his company, and you have this kind of symbolism, this is very clearly a yes, your husband is about to be laid off because of that combustion and the upcoming combustion and conjunction from the sun. Now you might say, what about Cazimi? Doesn't the Cazimi mean like a rebirth? Yeah, but not first, right? The first thing that happens is that Jupiter is being burnt up by the sun. When the sun is the job and Jupiter is the spouse, and there is a possibility that this kind of event happens, then yes, that is exactly what happens. We can also see, if we take out the outer planets, which is something we toggle back and forth in our horary class, we take out the outer planets and we can also see that the very next thing that is going to happen is the moon, as an indicator of the flow of events, is about to trine the sun and then immediately hit Jupiter, which means that the moon is also translating the light from the sun to Jupiter. And when the sun is acting here as a malefic, burning Jupiter up, this is another sign that the flow of events is going to lead that malefic sun to eliminate Jupiter. The malefic sun only in this context because Jupiter is combust. So anyway, these are little rules of horary, and there's a ton of them, right? For every different kind of question, there are different ways of assigning planets to the parts of a question, and there are different techniques that we use to answer the question. In that case, the judgment of the chart was, it does look as though your husband is going to be laid off, and indeed, that was the outcome. Her husband was laid off within like a week. So the way that I framed it in the answer was very uplifting, because I said, this is when we see this kind of event, a Jupiter Sun Cazimi, which we've had in the sky recently just now too, as I'm making this, that can be a sign of rebirth. So even if there's a death and a loss here of job, the opportunity for this to be a career reset is also implied by the transition of this Jupiter Sun conjunction. And she did write to me later in the summer last year to tell me that he found a new job. So, and it was indeed like a positive reset. So half of the art of horary is delivering the news. How do you deliver a predictive result without increasing someone's anxiety, in a way that's constructive? How do we take what we see and translate it for someone when the question is predictive? And there's often a lot of, people have a lot of emotion invested in the outcome. So This is a beautiful form of astrology. If you are interested in studying it, here is how to register. You go over to the website, which is nightlightastrology.com, and you are going to go to the courses page. And when you're on the courses page, you're going to click on the horary course. You need to have a background in understanding dignities, aspects, and house meanings. And then it starts on June 22nd. At the bottom, you will find that there is need-based tuition assistance. And there are also payment plans that you can utilize, and a one-time payment saves a little bit of money. So, but if you need tuition assistance because it would be impossible for you to take the program otherwise, please be sure to check that out and come study horary. It's an amazing, amazing form of astrology. If I could do nothing but practice horary, I would, because it is so interesting to see the unique picture of each situation come to life in the context of a horary reading. There's no birth chart needed for it either. It's amazing that astrology can work that way. We always think, oh, it has to work off from a birth chart. No. We can use astrology just like we use tarot cards. Cast them out at the moment a unique question comes up. Cast a chart at the moment of a question, and you have a series of techniques and approaches that can help you answer it. So that's horary in a nutshell. I hope to see you guys there, and thanks for listening.